Chapter 11. When the ladies removed after dinner, Elizabeth ran up to her sister, and seeing her well guarded from cold, attended her into the drawing-room, where she was welcomed by her two friends with many professions of pleasure. And Elizabeth had never seen them so agreeable as they were during the hour which passed before the gentlemen appeared. Their powers of conversation were considerable. They could describe an entertainment with accuracy, relate an anecdote with humor, and laugh at their acquaintance with spirit. But when the gentlemen entered, Jane was no longer the first object. Miss Bingley's eyes were instantly turned towards Darcy, and she had something to say to him before he had advanced many steps. He addressed himself to Miss Bennet with a polite congratulation. Mr. Hurst also made her a slight bow, and said he was very glad, but diffuseness and warmth remained for Bingley's salutation. He was full of joy and attention. The first half-hour was spent in piling up the fire, lest she should suffer from the change of room, and she removed, at his desire, to the other side of the fireplace, that she might be further from the door. He then sat down by her, and talked scarcely to anyone else. Elizabeth, at work in the opposite corner, saw it all with great delight. When tea was over, Mr. Hurst reminded his sister-in-law of the card-table, but in vain. She had obtained private intelligence that Mr. Darcy did not wish for cards, and Mr. Hurst soon found even his open petition rejected. She assured him that no one intended to play, and the silence of the whole party on the subject seemed to justify her. Mr. Hurst had therefore nothing to do but to stretch himself on one of the sofas and go to sleep. Darcy took up a book, Miss Bingley did the same, and Mrs. Hurst, principally occupied in playing with her bracelets and rings, joined now and then in her brother's conversation with Miss Bennet. Miss Bingley's attention was quite as much engaged in watching Mr. Darcy's progress through his book as in reading her own, and she was perpetually either making some inquiry or looking at his page. She could not win him, however, to any conversation. He merely answered her question and read on. At length, quite exhausted by the attempt to be amused with her own book, which she had only taken up because it was a novel, she gave a great yawn and said, "How pleasant it is to spend an evening in this way! I declare, after all, there is no enjoyment like reading. How much sooner one tires of anything than of a book! When I have a house of my own, I shall be miserable if I have not an excellent library." No one made any reply. She then yawned again, threw aside her book, and cast her eyes round the room in quest for some amusement, when Elizabeth happened to see that she was earnestly looking at Darcy, and her sister at the same time said, "Mr. Darcy, you must allow me to persuade you to join me in my admiration of Miss Eliza Bennet's fine eyes, for I have always thought them to be the brightest eyes of any girl in my acquaintance." He looked up for a moment, and then coldly replied, "They are brightened by the exercise," and instantly resumed his book. Miss Bingley's admiration was all for his sister. Elizabeth could not help observing, as she turned over some music books that lay on the instrument, how frequently Miss Bingley's eyes were fixed on Darcy. She could guess by the alteration of his manner when he spoke to her, and was convinced that he was really fond of her, though he hardly spoke 10 words to her through the whole evening. At length, quite tired of the restraint which her own feelings had made necessary, she gave a loose to them, and began to talk freely to Mr. Bingley. Her ease and cheerfulness delighted him, and though he had been much disposed to admire her before, he now found her more fascinating than ever. Darcy looked at her only to criticize, but no sooner had he made a remark on the wild energy of her spirits than she turned away to entertain Jane, and he was left to meditate on her with a sense of admiration and respect, though mingled with doubt and disbelief.
If you enjoyed Chapter 11, subscribe now for Chapter 12 and the rest of this amazing story. You can also find the full playlist here to improve your English with ease. Don't miss out.